Good to be here. Thanks, Alec, for the invite. In the brief time that we have in this first session, I want to talk to us about enabling the conversational AI promise. It has been maybe 4.5 years of this promise. Some would argue 5. That would be a little bit of a stretch for me, but sometime in 2016, we had this promise in conversational AI that would be a really magical turning point where voice and text and gesture all together would be part of the conversation module that we would use in going forward in driving the things that happen around us. And so enabling that promise, however, has taken some time. It was meant to be something that would be the milestone of what some are calling this fourth industrial revolution of the way that we enable ourselves and the way that we drive business. Let me tell you a bit about the promise, however. The promise is to provide an unmatched customer experience. And what we mean by that is for it to be unmatched in its experience, it needs still to be very human. It needs to not be a dialogue between a person and a machine so much as it needs to be a very human conversation where the machine portion of it seems to be transparent, where I can feel that I'm speaking with another human. It also needs to be very simple, cannot be complicated for adoption purposes. So human and simple, and it needs to be something that could be adopted in such a way that it would be very familiar with the other things that are normal to a consumer, to a person, to a human. And the learning curve needs to be so low that it is intuitively understandable in order for this to be a real unmatched customer experience. And this, of course, these set of experiences would be powered by voice and chat innovations. It wouldn't be a one thing, and or 2016 to 2020 Trek shows us it's not just a one thing that will be the innovation for voice and chat for conversational AI. There are a number of things that have to come together in order for it to be a really mature kind of experience. But these innovations would enable personalized content and access, personalized in a timely fashion. So just when I need it, wherever I am, 24 access on demand, my way. And it needs to be contextual, not just where I am, but what I'm doing, what I'm focused on, what I'm surrounded by, my environment. And it needs to be continuous. It can't just be a one-stop hit and every month I may get this. This needs to be something that follows me throughout my journey with a brand, with a product, with a series of brands and products, within a genre of experiences. And this needs to happen through very natural human conversations that will take place not between people and machines, but between people and brands. And this kind of the promise really for the enterprise, for the companies that offer this, the promise really was a lot of data around people, around the questions that they asked, the thoughts that they had, how they asked about a product. It would dust up, it would evoke a tremendous amount of customer data and customer behavioral data, transactional data that would for a company be insightful, and insightful to such a degree that it would change the way that they valued what they provided back to the customer. And that value would create new revenue streams. It would create new methods of communicating with customers. This promise for both the customer and the enterprise was huge. But we have not really seen the fulfillment of the conversational AI promise. We've seen bits and pieces, glitters, little glimpses of the conversational AI magic. But for this promise to really come through, we've had to work really hard, and there's a lot more work that still needs to be done. Now, the promise itself has been in part fulfilled. And I want to show that to you. The portion of the promise that you and I are well aware of. Some of you have come into careers now because of the experience component of the promise. We're seeing chatbots, we're seeing voice bots, we're seeing virtual coaches, we have telemedicine, we've got wearables, we've got cars that are integrated with all of our multiple ways of communicating through conversational AI. The way that we're transacting and ordering things, the way that we're communicating to others about the things that are valuable to us, the way that we buy things, the way that we get transportation done. Conversational AI at the surface experience level has been exceptional in driving adoption, trends of adoption, and making sure that there are no conversational devices on shelves in stores. It's constantly being bought, or worlds are littered with them. I have 5 conversational AI devices just in my office here with me right now. And they're more littered throughout the house. In fact, in your home, there are probably smart speakers that you no longer use because you use another smart speaker in a different room. It is that normal to us. So the experience has been very innovative and ought to have been. Comes across very useful. It is empowering because I'm able to do something now that's in my control. It's understandable. I don't have to try and figure it out. It's there, but it's not in my way. It's unobtrusive. And for some of this, maybe 40% of it, it does come across very human. It's supportive. And the way that we see it stringing throughout our time at home, at work, at play, in the community, while shopping, and during entertainment, while driving, in the park, walking with the dog, it becomes very connective to the different portions of our lives. And for companies, it becomes very scalable. And even for us, it becomes, as consumers, it becomes very scalable as well. The experience connects me across multiple brands so that I can have a more asynchronous kind of connection throughout my walk. So the experience promise has paid off, but it's not the only portion of the promise that needs to be paid off. Within the experience, I am given information. I'm simply informed. I can ask, what time is it? And it will tell me what time it is. I can ask, what's the top song on the Billboard charts? And it will tell me what the top song is. I can ask, what movie is trending the most right now on Netflix or Hulu or Prime? And it will give me that information. It is historic data or current status based on historic data. So I'm informed, but that's all the experience portion of the promise does for me. And it's an oddity for someone like myself who spent 29 plus years within the experience, design, UX, agency realm, where customer experience is top for me. And I've spent the last 4 years focusing on emerging technologies such as conversational AI. So it's odd for me to say that the experience of conversational AI is razor thin. It is just surface level at this point. There's more that we need to have besides it seeming to be innovative, or the supportive nature of it, or the empowering nature of it, or the intuitive nature of it. And I suggest we actually need to move along a certain kind of, not just experience, but experience outcome continuum. I've got to move from simply being informed to being smart. I've got to be smarter than I was once I learned this. So if I ask what the top song on the Billboard's charts is, I should be able to get that and be informed, but I ought to understand why and how. Smart does that for me. I need to know which song was jumped and the top song for last week, where that went. Did that go to number 5 or did it simply go to number 2? I need to understand the one that's number 1 now. Where was it 7 weeks ago? So I can see the trajectory of that. That would be important for me. Being informed is not just enough. I need to move to an outcome of being smarter because of this exchange with conversational AI. But as smart as I would be then, it still is not enough. I would need to move to an intelligent state, an intelligent outcome, experience outcome with conversational AI, where I understand why something has happened with being smart, but now I can predict what would naturally come next. If we stay at this place, here's what's going to happen. My bank account was this amount. Now I understand it was that amount because my daughter bought something, and the intelligence can give me a pattern of what has happened over time and coach me into what I can predict going forward. So there are things beyond simply being able to communicate with conversational AI that need to happen to bring me to a place of intelligence. And then the fourth place is the peak. Artificial intelligence is just that. It's artificial. It's data summarized for me. It's assumed, based on algorithms, assumed intelligence. But human intellect needs now to take that intelligence and do something with it. And intelligence just sits there until some wise thing has been done with it. We need to move from the cold but valuable form of artificial intelligence to the warmth of human wise decision-making. Here I can figure out what the next best thing ought to be. Being informed is okay. And in large part, that's where we have been up until the middle of 2019. But up to that point, we were missing 3/4 of the entire equation. And so I want to talk to you about what other technologies would be needed to help us get there. Conversational AI, though we had hoped that it would be our hero for some time, has been more of an enabler. No one wakes up in the morning as an executive and says, you know, I think I'm going to spend $2.5 million on conversational AI. No one goes and says, I'm going to buy that. No one says, I'm going to buy $3 million worth of computer vision. Just doesn't happen. But there are things that individuals will spend money on. I'm going to spend money, 2.5 million, 3 million more on customer retention, or I'm going to buy it on customer acquisition. And so while we have this momentum that's happened for us in conversational AI, as conversational AI has matured and grown, it's grown from the notion, the promise of being the superhero to being a super enabler. And as we look forward to 2021 ahead of us, there are things that we're being asked to do now that we would not have been asked to do before. Even in 2020, our plans were about 40% on the back burner. Those things for conversational AI now has been moved up because of COVID. Now we have a very touchless, voice-driven, non-person, non-contact way of living, and conversational AI as an enabler and other emerging technologies to enable that kind of experience have become a confluence of co-enablers to get that done. But while conversational AI has matured and grown, there are other technologies as well that have matured and grown that I think if you want to do anything worth value that you could call valuable, that we're going to have to use these in order to get that done. And I'll walk you through a couple of them. Emotional AI, assessing and understanding how someone feels in the moment, and not just understanding that, but capturing that and then making a response based on that, providing a different kind of option to those individuals. Augmented intelligence, where I not only hear what a salesperson is saying, but whatever my camera is looking at, I can get augmented information about that as well. Behavioral biometrics, The notion of being able to sign in with facial, voice, fingerprint recognition, but not just that, behavioral biometric payment, having my digital wallet be something I never have to pull my wallet out. I just walk through the store and I'm able to, through voice and some other gestures, be able to get what I need and move on out without any fuss at all. That has a tremendous amount of promise. Computer vision, the notion of being able to see, can you imagine, and capture everything that's happening in the aisles of a store, be able to provide that back to, from a regional standpoint, to see where things are in the store, what's needed across a region of stores, not just one store. Computer vision is being used very powerfully in that way right now, and other ways as well. Embedded intelligence, where there are products that we'll come across that are not typically IoT products. You wouldn't think of them as that. In our COVID world, where we now are looking forward to safe buildings and employees that operate safe in buildings, you want to think of something like a bathroom sink that would be able to measure how long someone is washing their hands, and when they wash their hands for 20 seconds, acknowledge through some kind of token or some other capacity that this employee has washed their hands thoroughly. And that employee, as computer vision helps to walk and see where that employee is going, we know where employees are that have been washing their hands, keeping themselves safe, and we know which ones are not. And so we can in some way signal them, request them, without knowledge of consumers, to go ahead and do that. These are one way, just one way, of using embedded intelligence in things that are not typically IoT. Behavioral analytics, you can imagine all of the analytics that we would get from how people behave when they come into a store, when they come into a space, the genre of behaviors that happen during a specific time for a restaurant, evolutionary AI, the notion of having a new model that is able to predict things that don't exist right now, to predict trends that will happen but yet have not taken place. Connected products, we just spoke about that with embedded intelligence to some degree. Think of all of the IoT products that are available. There are tremendous amount of things that we are able to do with those. And then we have causality. Causality is, why did something happen? And because this happened, what's the butterfly effect digitally for something else to take place? Geospatial analysis, the notion of taking a look at all of the GPS-esque type of imagery and data, tying that together to take a look at what trends may be. In sensor and IoT data and analytics, you know well what to expect there. Adaptive ML, responding and adapting on the fly, these algorithms do, based on statistical information that they're finding. And so they're adapting real time. AR, VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, tied together or separate. And then generative AI. These are 14 of a possible 28 emerging technologies that have grown over time and have matured along with conversational AI. And because of this maturation, there are huge bets on AI globally. The IDC is predicting, and this was pre-COVID, so get that, pre-COVID, the prediction was $186 billion spent over the next 3 years on AI. That's the global spend. When they ask why, the two primary reasons for investing: customer experiences and increasing customer growth and retention. All about the consumer. Gartner tells us that with this spend, it would create just under $4 trillion worth of value. So depending on the company that you spend your time with, the place that you are now, working on the project that you are, one has to ask the question, if conversational AI has these enabling pairs, if this money is going to be spent, how can I get a piece of that pie? is the enterprise question. For me, the question then becomes, if $3.9 trillion of value is going to be created, where am I investing my energies with these enablers to create that value? And there are three areas that I believe are important for us to focus on. The first is hyper-personalization. The notion of surrounding customers with contextually tailored products, data, and content experiences. Very selfishly and rightfully so, the customers, including you and me, say, I need you to inform me, to know me, to understand me, to enable me, to satisfy me, and to wow me. You see this kind of behavior all over the place, but one example, I was just speaking within the last week or so with a large communication company that is competing now against the streaming services and having their models of providing entertainment challenged because of the ability for customers to just stream services, stream and get their entertainment elsewhere. And so as we took a look at, let's say, Netflix versus Hulu versus Amazon Prime, the fact of the matter is that when we press our button, if it takes too long, even though they're informing us, they're knowing us, they understand us, it's just our menu, it's just for us. If they're not satisfying us in the moment, a touch of a button takes us to a completely different streaming service. And that's how competitive that landscape is. So no one, absolutely no one, has the option of not hyper-personalizing in this way. You must, because even in the hyper-personalization space, the competition is sky high. The second that we take a look at is agentless care. And what I mean by agentless care is I don't need to speak to someone. It is an extreme self-service. It's an experience that needs to be very empowering, intuitive. It needs to be on demand whenever I want it. It should be accessed anywhere that I want it. And it needs to be understandable. And it needs to be very connective. It needs to allow me to do what I want at the pace that I want, akin to going to the grocery store and having the option of going through the regular aisle or going through self-checkout. And because I'm a slowpoke, when I go through self-checkout, it takes me longer than if I were to be in the normal aisle. But I'm more satisfied at that because I get to do this at my own pace. And I don't have to interact with others or anything like that. I can just do that by myself. And many folk feel the same way, that they want to have this sense of control. Agentless care provides that. And then if hyper-personalization and agentless care really about the humans, the insight-driven decisioning is really about the enterprise. From an enterprise level, I should be able to pull insights and make my decisions based on insights as opposed to a tremendous amount of reports. Happening in the enterprise reporting analytics world right now is a new phrase called world without reports, where I only need insights as opposed to big hunking reports. Those insights should drive the type of actions that provide hyper-personalization for the customer and a supportive enablement for agentless care for the customer. And of course, both of those then help to drive decisions that happen within the enterprise. And the wheel continues to turn and refine and refine. Let me show you, we started speaking about smart, intelligent, and wise. And we've taken a look at hyper-personalization, agentless care, insight-driven decision-making. The example that I have for you is this. If you take a look at just the top row, the convergence of these two, in the smart way, I could provide contextual options. Lance is at the grocery store, and this is the right set of produce for Lance. So this is the right coupon for anyone in this portion of the grocery store. It's right for me. Intelligent would be a very personal choice because I'm not just in the vegetable section, but I go ahead and I juice cucumbers and carrots. And so it will give me something that's perfect for me because it knows what I continue to buy. Dynamic opportunities would be only for me. No one else gets this coupon. No one else gets this offer, and it would be singularly for me. We can create any of these, but they need to keep going in this manner, along this continuum. The same thing happens for agentless care, where I am informed, I get advice along the way, and then I have transactional power. And the same thing takes place for insight-driven decisioning. What happened? Why did it happen? What will happen next? And what's the wise next step for me to take? This framework here can provide us a very pinpointed way of creating a different kind of project within the conversational AI space. Let me show you just a couple examples of this in action now as we close. For hyper-personalization, consider the drive-through innovation. I come into the drive-through first, and if you're going to personalize the drive-through experience for me, one has to then identify who I am. And I may need computer vision, connected products, geospatial analysis, sensor and IoT data, and I may need embedded intelligence in the hardware that's outside of the building as I drive up, so that I'm recognized either by facial recognition, my easy pass signal, or other latent kind of signals, or my license plate, depending on state authority. That differs from state to state as we're going through that now. And once I'm understood, once I get known, then I'm understood. I may have a greeting that will be different in the morning versus at lunchtime versus in the evening. And we have different emerging technologies that help here: emotional AI, augmented intelligence, behavioral biometrics. The same thing may go for when I now see a menu that's not like anyone else's menu. This is, in fact, a personalized menu. It's just for Lance. It's just for me. It's my family members. It's my favorites, and no one else gets that. And then I can get a hyper-personalized set of menus that can be changed over time. I can use biometric payment, and I will never have to even speak about payment. I'll just go through. These kinds of innovations are coming. The innovations in the software and the emerging technologies exist. The convergence of them is what we're working on currently. And so you can see in this example that this goes well beyond conversational AI, though conversational AI is a key component for it. The other two options that we'll not have time to go through here in full is the notion of agentless care, where I can use conversational AI to inquire, to plan, and to act. And the conversational AI agent as support will inform, advise, and enable. And there are a number of emerging technologies that are needed to make sure that that experience takes place. And we can do that also for insight-driven decisioning. I believe Alec will give you a copy of this PDF so that you can take a look at this with a little more time and be able to, in a measured way, go through it. But here, getting real-time notifications, having voice-driven data visualization, having really actionable insights that lead to the next right step and action to make operational efficiencies a reality. And so we come back to where we started. The notion of providing an unmatched customer experience. That's human, that's simple, that's familiar, that's understandable, powered by voice and chat innovations that we now know will be also powered by a great many other emerging technologies that enable personalized content and access in a timely manner, in a contextual manner, in a continuous manner, and through a very human set of exchanges, not just conversations between people and the brands they love. I thank you so much for listening here. I hope that this may inspire some new way of thinking about your effort within the conversational AI space and what that will mean for the great promise of conversational AI and beyond. Thank you.
Hi, Lance. We had a couple questions from the audience.
Sure.
The first one was from Chris. He was asking you to give some examples of emotional AI that you've seen either in like a POC or pilot or in prod.
Yeah, and a lot of these right now for emotional AI, you're seeing internally right now. So context to the answer is that just like conversational AI right now, where there are a lot of POCs and pilots, more POCs and pilots because people are tiptoeing in, not jumping directly into the pool. We have the same for emotional AI. So it's going to be more on the POC side than it will be in production. But on the POC side, what you will end up seeing are things like assessing the way that someone responds when they're in a car, testing out a car. It may be in a showroom. And I'm speaking to two different companies right now about that kind of work that they're doing. Or when I sit in the car and I'm speaking to the salesperson, or even if I'm by myself, the notion of having sensory equipment there that captures what I'm looking at and how I'm responding to it, and having the salesperson, unbeknownst to me, give me information about what the camera is picking up or the sensors are picking up that I'm focusing on. If I hold the wheel tightly, he or she may speak to me about the kind of drive modes that this car has. So that's one example of how emotional AI is being leveraged.
Thank you. We had another question from Kara. She was asking about some of the negative effects of hyper-personalization, where people are being shielded from things that are not within their pre-existing profile, how to kind of combat that bias.
Yeah, so there is ethical AI that is a movement currently. I think we have to be very, very, very careful, right? When you take a look at the life science and healthcare space and HIPAA, you take a look at the banking space with a lot of regulations, where not just how people feel or how they purchase things, but their actual property, financial within the banking space is concerned. One has to be very, very careful. I won't be the expert on how we handle these things. I do know that there is caution, I think unjustifiable caution, on some companies as they're going slow because they want to make sure they're treating patient data right for healthcare and life science industries, that they're respecting the rights of their customers, that even while they give them experiences that are good, they don't want to create another experience where there's lack of trust or the loyalty for that brand gets eaten away. I think proceeding with some caution will help us there. But I believe that in the same way that some of this will become so normalized and laws will be put in place so that we're protected, I think that's going to be part of the solution. But Kara, thanks for your question. I'm not an authority on what we ought to do with it, but I do know that some things are being put in place. I'm sensitive to the concern.